Okay, this time we're doing U.S. states with a GDP per capita higher than the country average versus lower than the country average. In blue is higher, and in red it is lower. Some of these actually surprised me. Up here in the Northeast, Maryland, Delaware, and D.C. are all part of the blue team, while Pennsylvania and Virginia are not. Might be a bit confusing. Rhode Island's part of the red team. This part of New England, much of the South, basically all the South, up here, much of the Rust Belt, and a bunch of these rather unpopulated western states. While the blue team is home to, well, a bunch of the Northeast, Illinois, and then a bunch of this, North Center, I guess, and then the Pacific, Texas. Texas surprised me. I did not expect Texas to be that rich. But if it wasn't for Texas, then the red team would probably win too easily. So I'm actually kind of glad that Texas is wealthy enough. So these two nations, so the red team is all connected, while the blue team is cut off. So that's a huge advantage for the red team. However, the blue team, by the way, we're assuming everything that's not part of the U.S. is C. So in Mexico, that's a C. But Illinois is cut off, and a lot of the blue team is cut off. So they hope to connect all of this, while the red team hopes to cut it off before they can connect it. So the way they do that, the red team makes the first move by, because this is a very narrow strait, the red team tries to make it less narrow by pushing a bunch into Colorado. And then they take a bunch of eastern Colorado, just cutting off, this kind of connection route between the blue team. However, while that's happening, the blue team starts pushing along the coast of Oregon. And they make decent progress, hoping to connect Washington. But they're eventually stopped closer up north. While at the same time, troops from Washington start pushing up here, but they are stopped around Portland. However, they manage to outflank the enemy and cut off this area. And these two fronts are now connected. And then from there, it's pretty easy. They just push in and they take Portland. And the rest of Oregon falls because the state surrenders, as their leaders were cut off, so their leaders were either told surrender or be captured. Meanwhile, that's a big advance, but the red team is starting to push on Illinois. They hop the river at St. Louis and take the greater St. Louis area. And from there, they push down the river. In Indiana, they push a bunch. And they push a bunch into the north. But the greater Chicago area still holds. And a bunch of people in this part of Indiana, like Gary, kind of rely on Chicago because it's part of the greater Chicago area. So they want to be part of the blue team. So they get really motivated to fight. And they really they need Chicago. So everyone there joins the army and pushes into Illinois. Now, there are some troops here. They start pushing in the south, by the way. There's some troops here. Chicago's put under siege. There are some troops in Illinois. And these troops, they're sent on an emergency evacuation. Many of them are put in submarines and boats in submarines and planes to try to escape them to non-surrounded areas. So they actually do this. It kind of works, but in the end, most of the troops have to surrender. Chicago falls, and that's a big deal. But while this is happening, the blue team pushes into Rhode Island. They just take it. It's undefended. It's trapped. There's nothing the red team could do about it. The troops are able to escape, however. They aren't surrounded. The troops here, on the other hand, this time, instead of just invading, they actually started naval blockade of the area and then invade New England. So, New England falls, and the troops there actually do have to surrender. So, the blue team has made some progress in taking Oregon, and New England is now fully under their control. However, what's it called? However, the red team took Illinois, which is huge. That's one of the largest states in the country. But a bunch of their troops were able to escape down to, like, this area. So these two fronts want to connect each other as they're both rather weak. So these states, a force in Minnesota and Nebraska, start pushing up, as well as a force in Oregon and Washington push into Idaho. Idaho they actually take, and the state surrenders, which connects these two fronts, which is big. And now everything is almost connected. If they could just take this, and they, the blue team is able to make an advance into, this is really heavily guarded, the, Oklahoma thing. So instead they try to, surround it. They invade Kansas from the north, and they invade here, and they close in on it, and they take Topeka. Kansas City is put under siege, Kansas City, Kansas, that is, and they actually stay under siege, so the red team holds on to their, people in this could still freely travel to this part of Kansas City. However, forces from Texas push into Oklahoma, and they take it, finally connecting these two fronts. So the two fronts, they're not connected, and everything is connected except up here. But up here, with these two now being connected, Texas is able to launch a huge, they send a bunch of forces up here, and then they cut this off, and these two states, both being weak states, surrender, and they actually made their own country, which will be represented in orange. Instead of being fully taken over, these nations could still have their sovereignty, as they are now part of the, what's it called? They are now part of the, what am I doing? They're now part of the they're blue team aligned, but they're independent, unlike, say, Oregon or Idaho. That's where I'm going to leave off this video. Actually, yeah, that's where I'm going to leave it off. The Northeast is connected, and in the West it's connected, but the red team still holds onto a lot of their eastern territories, as well as they took Chicago. But the blue team has surrounded this whole area, which is very big. Yeah, that's where I'm going to end it. Part 2 soon.